Good evening, everyone. I'm going to be diving into the origins of the professional standing army and why the United States transformed into that standing army. But before I do that, I want to explain the actual origins of the American military experience. Adam Smith, who authored A Wealth of Nations, inspired the American revolutionaries' political authority. He found that militias should be purely on the defensive and should always remain homebound. This is cited by George Niemis in Militia versus the Standing Army in the History of Economic Thought from Adam Smith to Frederick Ingalls on pages 28 and 29. And this is widely how forces were used in the English colonies in the early 17th and mid 17th century. They were composed of forces from communities, basically conscripted from men in the community to defend against native tribes. And the primary purpose that they didn't really have the standing army in the colonies is one, obviously the logistics of that and then providing resources is extreme, but also it actually comes from Republican thought and liberal theories from that of John Locke to Adam Smith, as I've just quoted. John Locke, a philosopher that would later inspire the founders of the American Revolution, he was disgusted by the authoritarianism of both Oliver Cromwell, who was a usurper against Charles I back in England. He found it equally impermissible to have a standing army of someone that is of Puritan thought, someone that is religious, but uses the army for the same goal, which is to take over the government. And he stated in Second Treatise of Government that citizens must use a natural force to repel an authoritarian government. This is cited on 243, which is why most of the colonials, English colonials, actually had to come to own their own weapons to organize and bear arms against native attacks. The British regulars during the French and Indian War actually found these militia forces. They didn't think very highly of them and their effectiveness. In fact, one officer said they were a pack of lazy, rum-drinking people and little good. This comes out of For Common Defense on page 42. So the development of militia was very slow, and it wasn't as effective as the colonies began to spread out. There wasn't really a way for them to launch offensives or attack their opponents. And this was even seen during the American Revolution. It really wouldn't be until Friedrich von Steuben trained the Continental Army, in which they became a professional standing army that could fight the British forces. William Feast, in a book called The Collapse of the Confederacy, all about the Civil War, he actually wrote a little bit about the American Revolution and the use of militia forces. He said the feats of such patriot partisans as Francis Marion, Thomas Sumter, Andrew Pickens, and Richard Henry Lee seemed to provide ample evidence of the effectiveness of guerrilla warfare in expelling invaders, particularly since these famous guerrilla leaders operated, of all places, in the South. Meaning the South was a vast array of geography and topography that ultimately hindered their ability to really push the British out of that region. It was primarily in just stalemate. It wouldn't be until Nathaniel Greene and Marquis de Lafayette actually was able to force Cornwallis into Yorktown. And this, even though this professional force, the Continental Army, proved to be a Republican standing army that supported the ideas of the revolution, the people still distrusted it. They still were very weary of them taking over Congress and setting up their own government. They were very, very nervous about this. And even in the 1790s, during the Northwest Indian Wars, you actually found Anthony Wayne having to work with General Charles Scott, who was a part of the Kentucky Mounted Militia, and they fought against the native tribes in that region. But Anthony Wayne does something pretty brilliant, and that is he's going to incorporate the militia into his forces and use them as basically a strike force against the natives in a decisive battle at Fallen Timbers. And this comes from his general orders for volunteers from General Scott. This is August 4, 1794. So despite all these successes, despite all these victories and the opening of the West, people still did not trust it. And this would continue to be a debate even into the 19th century and even early 20th century for that matter. But the use of militia forces was supposed to be seen as this liberal ideology, but at the end of the day, reality forces the United States to consider a professional standing army. Thank you.